Good evening, everyone. I am nice and loud tonight. Okay. Let's see. Welcome to the Thornapple Kellogg Board of Education regular meeting. We're in the Early Childhood Center at 7 p.m. on Monday, October 9th, 2023. And with that, Ann, would you do a roll call to board, please?
Yes, Powers.
Here.
Huson.
Here.
Smith.
Here.
Hamming. Here. Hess. Here. Brock.
Here.
Wenger.
Here.
Thank you. And if we'd all please stand, say the Pledge of Allegiance. And 3, 2, 1.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. All right, so we have several holidays to recognize today. We have Columbus Day, Indigenous Peoples Day, and Canadian Thanksgiving. So yes, I saw that today. I think last year we had a bunch too, like Valentine's, and so it's always a special day. Okay, with that, looking for a motion to adopt the agenda or make adjustments.
A motion that we adopt the agenda as presented. I'll second. Sorry, I'm a little closer.
Got a motion by Smith, second by Winger. Is there any discussion? All right, we'll take a quick vote here. All in favor of accepting the agenda as presented, please say aye. Aye. All opposed? Thank you, board. Motion carries. Okay, with that, we'll jump into public communication and public input. And the Board of Education recognizes the value of public comment on educational issues and the importance of allowing members of the public to express themselves on district matters. Members of the public may address the Board of Education during public comment for up to 3 minutes. Speakers will be recognized by the presiding officer and are asked to state their name, address, and group affiliation if applicable. As a reminder, all comments shall be directed to the board and not to staff or other participants. No participant may speak more than once. Participants may not behave in a manner that is disruptive to the orderly conduct of the meeting. The Board of Education does not respond to public comment. The superintendent will follow up with speakers when appropriate. At this time, we'll begin public comment. I do have 2 cards, so I'll do those first, and then if anybody else would like to speak, you can speak then. Mr. Dave Lansma.
Sure. All right, good evening, everybody. I am David Lansma. My wife and I are precinct delegates from Yankee Springs Township and residents of the TK district since 1984. I will continue the discussion of allowing a second comment period by addressing some of the responses made last month by some board members regarding this question. 3 of the board members voiced clear objection to allowing a second public comment. 1 member offered up a form of compromise, and 2 members voiced clear support for the second public comment. We are waiting to hear from Dave Smith. In objecting to a second comment, it was stated in different ways that your minds are already made up. In other words, even though you are voted into your position ostensibly to represent the public on this board, you are stating that you do not care to hear their viewpoints because you have already made up your mind. You say this right after you said you value their input. So how does this process work? We are supplied with an agenda containing very little detail. The agenda is covered with the necessary description, discussion, and questions between board members, but the public cannot comment until next month. At that point, you then say your minds are made up and public comment would not change your minds. One of you commented that, quote, we try the best we can, quote, to introduce policy, etc., at one meeting and then vote the following meeting. This is disingenuous and self-serving. The public has to wait an entire month to offer a viewpoint, and then we are told it doesn't matter anyway. And that is likely true because your mind has been made up from your private conversations in intervening month. The references made to the large turnout of parents protesting the overt attempt to circumvent the will of the majority of parents holds no credibility at all. I'm sure some of you were upset with the well-deserved backlash received for attempting to use the muscle of the state-run health department to achieve your own intended goal for masking mandates. That entire effort was ill-conceived and without scientific basis and has since been proven unequivocally ineffective. You would only know this if you were willing to read the literature. Using a failed attempt to co-opt the better sensibilities and judgment of the people as a means to further co-opt the concerned and measured input of the public is not right. The angry voices you object to were not amped up by the provision of a public comment period. They were amped up by the behavior of certain members of that board. That backlash was deserved, especially so because it had to be uncovered by FOIA efforts. This board will not reestablish trust merely by making a statement. It will require consistent honesty, transparency, and trustworthy actions. Adding the live feed was a strong step in that direction. Please do not fall back on claims of baseless public interference or irrelevance as a reason to restrict or reduce the public's voice on this very board that we elect you to sit on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Robin Lansma.
Good evening. I'm Robin Lansma. Our kids graduated from TK and we live in the TK School District. We reside in Yankee Springs Township. I would like to comment on the addition of a second comment time at the end of the meeting. Thank you for discussing it at the last meeting, as we, the parents, guardians, and residents of the TK District, have been asking for this addition to the TK School Board meetings for a while now. Tonight, as you consider it again, we ask you to approve the addition of the second comment time. At the last meeting, I was disappointed with statements by some of the board members to deny the opportunity for the TK parents, guardians, and residents to make public comments at the end of the meeting. Honestly, these reasons are baseless. They project that you want to control the voices of the people you represent. You are elected to serve the people of the TK School District. You are not in any way elected to lord over people who vote you in to represent them. All elected officials serve to represent the people. You should be thankful for the people who show interest in the business of our school district. You should be willing to listen to and be happy that they care about TK. It was brought up at that meeting that could run for a very long time with repeat topics by concerned folks. Wait a minute. Isn't it your responsibility to listen to the concerns of all parents, guardians, and residents of TK, however long it takes? This silly statement is being portrayed as if this may happen at every meeting. It is likely that this statement is based on the years when the school system had some tough issues to deal with during the COVID years. It is taking an extreme and trying to portray it as the norm. It is not the norm. It was also stated that everything would have been voted on already, and that is that. No comment. What about the principal reports on how the kids are doing in his or her school building and steps being taken to improve, or the book that needs review, or the good financial state the district is in? There are times when we just want to be able to say, thank you. What a great job you are doing. Make a comment for the board to think about for the next meeting, etc. To deny a second comment is silencing the people who care about this district. It is very common for meetings to have second comment time. We attend many meetings that have second comment opportunities. I urge you to vote yes for a second comment time. Thank you again for the live stream and putting the video up on YouTube. It was very helpful to be able to review and prepare for this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Those are again, our two with a card. Is anybody else would like to speak? Yes, come on up.
Do I have to do it in 58 seconds? I'm not that fast. Candace Johnson, Thornapple Township, been in Middleville 40 years. And I've got my August 14 agenda because I had questions after that meeting, but because there's not a second public comment, I couldn't ask them then, so I'm delayed. But I would have asked them 2 months ago. And that is regarding the AP Environmental Science textbook proposal. I really had concerns based on the presentation of the person who was presenting regarding the book. I was concerned about the teaching to test, great emphasis on how there were questions at the end of the chapter so that they could figure out how to test well. That concerns me. Teachers should be in this for a love of teaching. I looked at the public school review. I don't know how current this is, but I looked at the math and reading scores for the middle and high schools. Math for the middle school was 35%, high school was 37% rated throughout the country, reading at 46% for the middle school and 61% for high school. And then we're introducing environmental science textbook. I'm wondering how political it is. When I heard that they're following the science, that was a sentence I just would prefer never to hear again. I believe that there should be textbooks that are affordable. In fact, I believe Mr. Winger could teach an excellent environmental science class with a farmer's almanac. And the kids, it would be affordable, it would be applicable to Berry County, to our kids, to our community. So I think that this could have, well, it was voted in last month when I missed it. So my public comment now really is, it really doesn't matter, other than it would have been nice to have been able to ask those questions at the end of the August 14 meeting. So again, I'm concerned about the cost of textbooks, and if science is changing that much, which I don't think it is, why can't we pull out our old science books and have the kids read from books rather than screens? Screens are not good for our kids. Reading screens before bed, and then their brain is stimulated for 2 hours, and then they have to get up at school for school, what, at 6:30? I don't know what time school starts anymore. I'm glad I don't have to get up for school. So anyways, my point is, we need textbooks, and we need to have things that are affordable and applicable to our community. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
That was intense.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak at public comment? Anyone else that would like to speak? All right, thank you. That closes public comment. And our next item is consent grouping. So any consent grouping item can be removed for separate consideration by board member request. All consent grouping items will be adopted in one motion with a roll call vote. So looking for either a motion or some questions or discussion.
I have a question. So reading over the, wow, that's really loud. High school field trip, I just want to clarify. It says that we're approving 1 day. It actually looks like the FFA trip is 4 days when you go to the website.
It is 4 days.
It
Okay.
is 4 days.
She has 1 day on there. She has October 31st through November 1st. I just wanted to clarify that.
Okay,
4 days.
yes.
To make sure we're approving the right thing.
I did notice that the Bob Winger Memorial Fund was used for part of it. I just
pretty
smiled.
cool.
That's
It's a
cool.
Nice legacy for Bob.
That
Yeah,
is
it was
cool.
really cool.
Very cool. All right. Well, I'll move that we adopt the consent grouping as consent grouping as presented.
I'll second.
Okay, a motion by Hamming, and then Winger, was that? you?
Yeah.
Support by Winger. All right. Is there any discussion on the motion?
Oh, I'm just happy to see our kids going and engaging in FFA. Hello, we're a farm community, and it's, long overdue that we have staff, and that a staff that's really engaged in getting our kids, because it's an outstanding organization. It changed my brother's life, my dad's life. It's fantastic, so.
I think the only way you cap it off good is to get to Shipshawana and go to the Essen House for supper on the way back. Just agree
Right,
about that right
yeah.
time, so.
All right.
Okay, so we have a motion by Hamming, support by Winger. Any other discussion? All right, Ann, would you take us through a roll call vote, please?
Sure. Wenger,
Yes.
Brock,
Yes.
Hess,
Yes.
Hamming, yes. Smith,
Yes.
Huson,
Yes.
Powers.
Yes. All right, thank you, board. Motion carries. All right, and we're moving down to board items for information, which is Mr. McCarthy, committee and liaison reporting. Anything?
Well, we didn't have committee meetings, but I do have a quick update for you on construction. We have 4 things going on out there right now. The first one, the 3rd Street project and our exit from McFall to 3rd Street. Based on our conversations with the village and theirs with their contractors, the construction should be done by November 15th. And then we'll be able to use that exit during the winter, should actually ease up congestion there at McFall, so that's a good thing. Excuse me. The high school, the pool area continues to be the primary focus. The roof should be totally enclosed this week, airtight, or not airtight, but, watertight, for sure. So, and then all of our focus there is going to be on interior jobs then for the pool. All of the planning for next year's parking and paving work has been done, and we're all set to put out an RFP for bids later this month. We should be able to have bids back in time, maybe hopefully for November, to be able to award contracts for work that would start late next spring. And then our storage building project, as you know, we had to switch contractors. Our current contractor is in the process of getting plans to the state to get reviewed and approved, and we estimate that that building will be put up early November. So that's where we are with construction. And I don't know if there are any liaison reports from any of the other folks.
I have 2. TAPRC, we now do have a director. The director, Nate Fisher, had stepped back because it was just too much to do it along with teaching full-time for those 4 months when it's really, really busy. But he has asked to come back if he can do a job share with Lindsay. So they are going to divide and conquer because he enjoyed it and he didn't want to leave. So I'm excited because he did an outstanding job with our youth programming. The other liaison report is a reminder, October 18 is the KIASB dinner. For the audience, that's an association of all school board members to get together to learn. And the topic for all 3 dinners this year will revolve around career development and the increased opportunities to have a pipeline. So every kiddo has a plan and walks out of high school with a plan, a pathway to a career through career tech, or to a certification, or to an associate's or bachelor's degree program, but to increase participation so every kiddo is equipped to have a meaningful employment. So,
Thank you.
And then the library committee, we met at the Village Hall on September 12th, and we were all approved to be on the board, and we're in the process of scheduling our first meeting. So. And there was an article about it in the Sun and News if you want to review that.
Thank you. Anything else to report?
No.
Okay.
I think that's it.
All right, thank you. That takes us down to the Thornapple Kellogg 2022-2023 audit presentation. And
Yes, we have Jess Strauss here from Manor Casterison, our audit firm.
All right, thank you very much. Just want to give a little bit of a highlight before I jump into the slide deck that you have in front of you. First and foremost, we're here in October. The audit went really, really well. I just want to emphasize that not all school districts are in the hands that really Thornapple Kellogg is. We do issue findings for a lot of our schools. Here, you guys haven't seen findings, and sometimes I just like to re-emphasize the fact that what has been the norm here for so long can be taken for granted for a little bit. But finance team, all top to bottom, just does phenomenal work out here, and you guys really are lucky. When you look at the numbers that I'm going to go through as well, I just want to highlight a lot of the positives that have really happened over the past few years too. When we got into the whole pandemic, I want to say we were probably around $4 million in your fund balance for your general fund, which was an okay balance back in 2020, 2019 timeframe. But the districts that really took advantage and knew how to spend and really utilize that COVID-related funding have really seen a nice increase in their fund balance. We're sitting at about $7.8 million in your general fund balance, which is around 17-18%, which is really right in line with where a lot of schools are, especially the ones that really spent that money well, and still realized that our expenditures are going to continue long after the COVID money is gone. And did we do the things to put the district in the best situation going forward with a fund balance that was going to help weather any future storms? So those are some of the highlights of just where we are. But I will then get into the slide deck and the couple of documents that you have in front of you. So you have 4 documents. I'm going to touch base on 3 of them. The biggest one is all summarized within the handout in front of you with the slides, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. The other 2 letters I will touch base on, but they're really a required communication from the audit firm at the end of the audit, saying whether or not there were issues that needed to be brought to the board's attention, community's attention, and then a management letter, which I'll go over as well. But I'll hit on those at the end. Going through the slides that you have in front of you, I'm skipping to the 3rd slide within the deck first, and it gives you a summary of the audit results for the year. First and foremost, the most important thing is you were issued what we would call an unmodified opinion. That's the best opinion that a school district can get. That's exactly what you want. Additionally, we did have a new standard that we had to look into and see if it had a material impact on the school during the year. Last year, it was the new lease standard. Didn't impact a lot of schools because a lot of schools aren't in the practice of leasing buildings or anything that would be material enough to the financials. But what came down the road this year was GASB 96. It was very similar to the lease standard, but it looked at a lot of your subscription-based IT arrangements. So that would be potentially accounting software. Some curriculum would qualify, but not a lot. We did look into that. It didn't end up having a material impact on the statement, so there were no adjustments or prior period restatements that had to happen, but we did look at that and what the school had going on from that standpoint. In the large document you have, I'm not going to open it up, but on pages 77 and 78, we also issue what we would call a report on internal controls. What gets lost a little bit on boards and sometimes communities is that we're issuing an opinion on the numbers, which we are, but we're also required to look at the procedures, policies that the school has in place, and make sure that you have appropriate internal controls. We don't look at every single transaction, but we do sample, we do look at those policies, and we do make sure that we don't have any internal control issues that at least come to our awareness during the audit. No findings related to that as well. So again, exactly what you want to see from a board, from a community standpoint. You did receive a significant amount of federal funding during the year. So if you're over 750, we are required to do what we would call a compliance audit or a single audit under uniform guidance. That you can see in that right-hand column there. Unmodified opinion on the major programs that we looked at, which was going to be the ESSER money that was spent, as well as the child nutrition cluster. So we looked at both of those programs that the district receives funding through and had no issues with any of the stuff we looked at within those programs either. And then the other 2 points I'll touch base on the end, but that was the governance letter and the management letter. Next page, next slide, I guess, federal awards. It is important to remember that the COVID money, although it was a real silver lining to a lot of the situation that we all endured, it was a real benefit and a financial boon to a lot of the districts that we saw receiving this money. Up in that right-hand corner, you can see we had about $400,000 that was spent during 2021, another $750,000 in ESSER-related money that was spent during 21-22, and $2.2 million in the current year. That includes 11T and things like that as well. So there was a lot of real benefit that came to the district through those funds that really provided you to really keep the school operating as it should over those years. I mentioned at the bottom of that slide, you can see the other federal funding outside of the ESSER. You receive a significant amount of special education money and child nutrition cluster, $1.1 million in child nutrition and another $900,000 in special education. I only bring those up because they're the other what would be type A programs that occasionally we will rotationally have to test as well. The next slide you can see is the government-wide statement of net position. So within a school district, we have to issue financial statements that are on the full accrual and the modified accrual basis. When you look at the statement of net position, we're talking about the full accrual level. And that includes all of your capital assets, your long-term debts, the OPEB pension liability are all brought to the face of that statement in their full accrual, where they will show all of that, whereas the modified accrual is more budgetary basis, and you're looking at a one-year snapshot on what the plan for that year is. But when you look through this, you can see total assets of about $120 million compared to $113 million. That tells a story, but not necessarily the whole story. Obviously, it's better if you have more assets than a given year, but when you have a bond project, things like that, sometimes those numbers can be a little bit skewed. We had an additional bond issuance, Series 2 on your 22 bonds. In the current year, that was about $5.3 million, so we're seeing some of that impact the overall asset number. You can see the capital assets are up about $8 million, so we placed into service. We have CIP, that's construction in progress that we have going on for the past couple of years due to that 2020 bond project. $13 million of that was placed in service in the current year, and another $6 million was added into the CIP number this year. We also had $3.9 million of other capital assets that would have come out of not your main capital project, your 2020 capital project fund, but your other capital project funds. That includes other upgrades, whether it would be bus purchases and Chromebooks, computers, things of that nature. So overall, you can see we had about an $8 million increase in your capital assets. Total liabilities, this number is one, it looks a little skewed from what we saw last year, but you can see total liabilities are $180 million compared to $150 million last year. We've been talking about 9 years the pension and OPEB plan with MIPSers. It's still a real challenge when it comes to really figuring out what that number is going to look like for the MIPSers plan as a whole, plus districts and what their proportionate share, which is what we're showing here, really is. So it all comes at a point in time date and where those assets of MIPSers really sits as of September 30, 2022, which is their plan year end. So when you look back on that, you know the market was doing pretty poorly during September of last year. And what that really did was we didn't have a big change in what that MIPSers liability was, but their invested assets lost value significantly. So what that does is make the unfunded portion grow astronomically. It went from, I think, about a $26 billion unfunded number to about $37 billion unfunded as of September, and that gets spread out. So when you look at that, you can see both the OPEB number and the net pension liability number both increase, and that's really why you're seeing that number go up as well.
Jeff, can I interject here a
Sure,
second, too?
absolutely.
When, as board members, as you look at the bottom line here, the total net position, it gives us a negative number. But if you go up under the liability section and you see net pension liability and net other post-employment liabilities, those two combined are about an $80 million amount. That is really the state's liability for pension. If you take this out of our financial statement, we're sitting at a positive $40 million net value.
Right,
So
we're required by law to show.
we're required to show our portion of the state's pension liability, but when you pull that out of there, we are sitting in a much better position.
Yeah, and everything I said wasn't meant to like confuse or add extra stuff to think about. There's nothing any school district can do.
All right.
There's the plan out there, and they just split it up proportionately based on payroll that's submitted to them through ORS, and that's how they come up with this number. It just is what it is.
Right.
It brings a little bit of transparency to the situation, but you can't pay it down any faster. It's just a number they give to us and say, this is what Thornapple is responsible for, but that's a pretty loose term, if you will. It's your portion. So, yep. But as Mr. McCarthy had mentioned there as well, you can see we did still lower our deficit. So we were at a $47 million deficit at the end of last year. Through all of this activity, we're now at a $40 million deficit. But as you mentioned, it's almost all due to the numbers related to pension and OPEB. Moving on to the next page, we're shifting gears a little bit, looking at the fund level. So when you get your financials at your monthly or however often you have your board meetings, when you get that information, you're pretty much looking at your funds. Your general fund, your food service fund, your capital project fund, debt service funds, things like that. That's back to the modified accrual, and that's what you're looking at here. So this is going to show you your asset and your liabilities, which then ultimately provides you with your fund balance. You can see in the general fund, you have total assets of about 13 million. Yes, that makes up cash. There might be investments. There are investments in there. And it also makes up large receivables like your state aid, July and August state aid that didn't come in as of June 30, but you did receive subsequent to year end. Liabilities of $5.2 million. Again, that's mostly some AP, but a lot of your accrued wages and benefits, things like that, that's coming into that number. You take the net of those two numbers and it leaves you with your fund balance. So you have positive fund balance of $7.9 million. That's your assets less your liabilities. You can see across the rest of your funds as well, shows you your food service, community service fund. Your food service one, I'll touch base on it just real quick. You have a $447,000 fund balance there. That number is quite a bit down from where you were last year. That was by design. A lot of schools ended up having what MDE would consider excess fund balance. And essentially all that is you're allowed to have 3 months of expenditures. Very, very many districts got into a situation where they were getting a lot of federal funding. Now you're getting a lot of meals paid state funding. All of this is really contributing to a revenue number that's going up, but unless you're being potentially like careless with the expenditures within that fund, that number can only go up. So what a lot of districts have done is they've invested in new equipment, things like that, maybe other service options as far as foods that the kids might be able to have for lunch as far as healthy options to help increase the expenses in certain ways to get that number down. But we're just slightly over the excess fund balance as of June 30, $4,000 or $5,000. So Thornapple has really made a concerted effort to getting that number where it needs to be, but many districts are in a situation of this excess fund balance. The next page, this is going to be your revenues and your expenditures, and it shows us how we went from last year's fund balance to this year's fund balance. Again, I'll primarily focus on the general fund, but when you look at overall revenues, this also includes transfers in and out across funds. For the general fund, that's going to be predominantly transfers out. But when we look at the revenues, we had about $46 million in revenues, which is up from last year. I mean, we did get a boost in per pupil state aid foundation, which was helpful. That's going up again next year. There was a period of time where that wasn't the case, and we were basically treading water with that state revenue source. So overall, $46.7 million in revenue, offset by $45.1 million in expenditures. We were able to add $1.6 million to your general fund balance, taking you from 6.2 up to that 7.9 number. There's a lot of debate on what the right amount in a general fund might be. You're at about 17.45%. I've got a slide further on where it'll compare you to a few other districts and statewide. For a long time, the state really liked districts to be, not the state, sorry, MSBO would recommend districts be in that 10 to 15%. And that's the number I put in here as well as far as what they would recommend. But that number's really crept up through all the COVID funding. And you see a lot more schools sitting in that 18 to 22% range. So Thornapple will be right in line with where you would want to see them from a fund balance. And I think from an overall standpoint of what that number should be, you do have to realize that expenses have increased over the past 3 years, and they're not going to revert back to what we saw 4 or 5 years ago. So when that COVID money is gone, you are going to see a natural reduction in that fund balance within the general fund because there's really no other option for it to go. I mean, you may even see years where you are eating into fund balance because expenses are going to be somewhat fixed. Even if you're trying to keep that belt a little tight, expenses are a little bit what they're going to be. Food service, real quickly, I'll mention that one. You can see we did use up $337,000. That means we made a concerted effort there to spend down some of that fund balance. and that brought us down from that $784,000 to the $447,000, which is really, really close to where we want to be in compliance on the excess food service fund balance. The other three funds I just want to look at real quickly. You do have a 2020 capital projects fund. That's Series 1 and Series 2, so that is including the new $5.385 million issuance that happened during the year. You can see that's included in that $6,420,000 number, and we continue to spend down about $7.6 million in funds within that fund for the bond projects that were going on. We do have the non-major capital project fund. There's a little bit of activity going on there. We had some insurance reimbursements during the year, as well as some transfers in for those future projects of the district. And on the debt service side of things, you can see we do have a levy out there where we're getting property taxes on the debt service and making those payments to the tune of about $10.2 million in payments during the year. So overall, if you look in that right-hand column, you can see we did add overall $1.4 million across all funds, from a starting fund balance of just under $20 million up to that $21 million number. The next two slides are really illustratives, just to give you an idea of where all your revenues are coming from and where your expenses are, and kind of what that percentage looks like. You can see on that next slide, $35 million comes from state aid. That increased a little bit this year, which was very, very fortunate, and a lot of districts are seeing a good benefit from that. That's 76% of your revenue is coming from state aid. Federal is about 8%. Intermediate amounts, ISD, that sort of thing, about 7%. And then local is 9%. That includes a lot of your property taxes and things like that. On the expenditure side of things, you can see that pie chart as well. Instruction is going to be the largest one, 58%. You can see on the support side of things, that's about 38%. And then we also have about 1% on the community service side of things. So this slide, I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but when you look at this, it'll give you the trend of where that fund balance was. So when you look back to 2019, 2020, that was before all the COVID money started coming in. We were around that $4 million fund balance, and we've seen a real good managing of that money that was coming in. You were allowed to supplant expenses, and if you did it correctly, you could actually see a benefit in fund balance. And for Thornapple, that's really went up to that $7.9 million over the past 3 years. So a nice healthy add, but I just like to emphasize that revenue is going to go away and the expenditures are going to stay the same. So you don't want to get this idea that you have this huge fund balance to play with, because that's just really not true. The next one, we have some key performance indicators. This is where I was trying to give you an idea of where Thornapple compares overall to some of the other districts within the Kent ISD umbrella. You can see I had that MSBO recommendation, so that's Michigan School Business Officials. They always kind of stood by that 10 to 15%, but truly anymore, it's probably more 17 to 22, 18 to 22%, which is right where you're at. But you can see that comparison to the other schools. I mean, statewide, it's a 19% fund balance, and so all I'm saying is that 17% isn't anything so egregious that you should think that you just have are flush with funds within the general fund. But that's more for your information to go ahead and look at that. And that's all. The numbers above are the 21-22 data. That's what's been published. Those numbers are probably going to go up with the continued funding, so keep that in mind too. So even when we see that 19%, that's based on last year. Thornapple was 15.2% last year, so I expect those numbers to go up just with another year of that COVID funding in 22-23. Notes of the financial statements. I've touched base on these mostly already, so I'll go through really quick. Note one, I'd just like to point out that we do have to look at whether or not the expenditures that happen within a bond are appropriate and approved underneath what either the bond language is or the Section 1351. So we do look at that, we test that. Expenditures were appropriate. Capital asset detail, I mentioned that to you already, but that's note 3. Your bonds are all detailed out in note 6. And note 7, I know I mentioned it, but that's your pension and OPEB. Just to give you a little bit of input on that, the pension fund currently at the statewide level, full MIPSR's plan, is underfunded by $37 billion. Again, that's up from $26 billion last year, and the OPEB is underfunded by about $2.1 billion. So it is a real problem, just unfortunately, there's not a real answer to it right now, and certainly nothing the district can do. Note 13, GASB 96, I mentioned that. We did have to at least address that we considered it for the district. There just weren't any material impacts that needed to be presented. The last couple of slides here, from a board standpoint, I think the next one might be the most important slide that you're looking at. It shows really the great job that the finance team is doing. When you look at where you were from an original budget, final budget, and actual, that's what's presented in front of you. You can see final budget on the revenue side of things, and that's revenue and transfers in would be $46.5 million. We came in at 46,778,000. So there's a positive variance there of about 193,000, 0.42%. I mean, really, really good budgeting. On the expenditure side of thing, budgeted for $45.2 million and came in at 45.1. Again, $33,000 variance, 0.07%. Very, very, very tight budgeting. For me, maybe even a little too tight, but it's really, really good. I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean, you don't win any award for being very, very close necessarily.
Chris disagrees.
All right, yes, you did. Yes, you did. I've seen it on the opposite side of things where something unexpected came up when you were really, really close, and then it flips the other side, and that variance goes negative. And that is it's a budget violation within state legislation. So this is phenomenally close and really, really good. Maybe I'm just too conservative, but it's a really, really good job. Yeah, absolutely. Yep. The last piece I really have for you is just future considerations. So I mentioned it a couple of times. We've been in a real fortunate spot when it comes to the state aid. They are increasing that per pupil foundation. That's going up again for this current year that we're in. So $9,600 compared to the $9,150 per pupil. So again, we should see an increase in state funding just because of that increase, as long as pupil membership stays the same. So that's a good thing, and we didn't always see that. And then the last thing, I've mentioned this as well, on the COVID side of things, we did get a lot of that funding, but it's just important to remember that 23-24 is going to be one of the last big years of receiving and spending down that money. And after that, it's pretty much going to be gone, and we're going to be left with the organic revenues that we have from state aid, property taxes, things like that, and you're not going to see these outside influxes of funds like we have. So just something to be aware of. The last two things, and I promise I'll be really quick, and then you can kick me out of here. Two letters here. The first one is a management letter. This is more or less, it is MDE mandated. They really want to see where excess fund balance is an issue, because they know a lot of school districts are in a situation where they have excess fund balance within their food service fund. Last year, they got so many findings that came in because they weren't required to be a management letter. They wanted it to actually be a financial statement finding and issued as part of the statements. They just got, inundated with these excess food service fund balance. So they said, we don't want any of that anymore, but we do want it shown up in a management letter. So that's where it is. From a board standpoint, it's really more or less an FYI. The state will do their calculation and send a letter, but that's all this is really for, just so you know that that's where you're at. Again, I think we were around $4,000 to being within that fund balance allowability, if they will. But so many schools are in it, I don't know that I'd even bat an eye about that at all. It's just facts and circumstances of where it is. And the final piece, this is another one. I think it's overlooked a lot by boards. I think it's one of the most important documents that you get. You just see a very mundane boilerplate letter, but if there were any big issues that came up, we would be required to include them within this letter. I often refer to it as like an exit engagement letter, where it's our final communication kind of to the board if there was anything that should be of notice. And this is exactly what you want to see. We talk about some of the estimates, largely being the post-employment benefit liability and the pension liability. We do have estimations for fixed asset lives, things like that. But by and large, they're estimates that all school districts have within their financials. But going down onto the second page is where I really think it is more important from a board. We had no difficulties performing the audit. Your team does a great job. We had no corrected or uncorrected misstatements. That would be a situation where we as auditors thought there should be a number that would be different than what management said, and they didn't want to make that adjustment. We had no situations like that either. No disagreements with management. We did receive a management representation letter. That's their commitment to basically say they complied and gave us anything we really needed to do our audit appropriately. So we received that as well, and no other audit findings or issues. So it really is a clean letter and just like an opinion, exactly what you want to see. So I know I mentioned it, and I know I spoke for a long time. That wasn't really my intention. But your statements are in really good shape. I mean, this doesn't happen by accident. It's a lot of hard work over the past year. We just get to come in and take a look at it and say, did you or didn't you do good? But you guys really do just a phenomenal job day in and day out. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you very much, Jeff. And thank you, Craig and Chris. And please extend it to the financial team for keeping our district in good shape financially. Truly appreciate it. Board, do you have any questions for Mr. Strauss?
Oh, yeah.
He was
was
pretty
out.
thorough.
I do mean it. Like, we look at numbers a lot.
Page 112 now, no. So, no, thank you again
Yeah.
for thoroughly walking us through this, and, yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. There you go, see?
Yeah, I
It
really
became pretty clear that not everybody sees numbers like accountants do, so I mean, maybe providing a little more illustrations is helpful for those people that may not care about the numbers as much as we do, so, fair.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank
Safe
you.
travels home.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right. And that takes us to Ms. Chowza, I believe, with the Wonders English Language Arts textbook.
Yeah, I have a whole team with me.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask them to stand up here because we're going to tag team this. We're happy to be here with you to present the elementary ELA textbook proposal. I have three principals that are here to support us, so thank you. Paige, Lee, and Michelle are represented. Their staff is here. Some key players from our team. I am going to have them tell you who they are, but you'll be able to see on the screen here that the science of reading. Just want you all to know that Wonders is research-based. We're looking at the 2023 copyright. Was green in all ed reports and is actually been stated as having some of the top researchers in early literacy as the authors. Doug Fisher, Nancy Fry, the Words Their Way guru, who's into word study, not just learning and memorizing spelling words. And everything is based on this reading rope, which takes all the pieces and components of literacy learning to get to that final piece of being able to read and comprehend. And that is what we are working towards and trying to do with our students. Why are we doing Wonders? Why did we choose Wonders? Because the evidence and the research in it helped us believe and understand that it had the materials that we needed to work with whole populations of our students. And it had very directed teacher lessons and supports. We're getting a lot of new teachers in our district too. That's something we've spoken to. And with Reading Street and the process we put in place, we have that articulated vertical and horizontal alignment. And we can speak between ourselves and grade levels and between other grade levels. So it was important for us to have that. We're going to talk about some of the specifics. And here we go. Sarah, whole group.
Whole group instruction, obviously there's different types of material we use, but one of the new things for us is the reading writing companion. It's taking us through reading, rereading the same text, really high-end questions for critical thinking. Students can highlight, underline. We really work with the text a lot with our students, which was something new for us, and I think we all agreed that that was a positive thing. There's also vocabulary practice, differentiated spelling, phonics for all grade levels, even for us, that's a big focus for us at Page, so kind of mask that a little bit more. Close reading, and then writing is right in here too. We're analyzing text, modeled text for students, building them as readers and writers overall instead of a skill and a strategy at a time, which I think is beneficial for our learners.
Marnie.
For small group learning, after whole group learning, we bring our students into small group learning, and the small group instruction shifts to meet the student needs. It's based on data and assessments that we already do so that we can target our lessons through that differentiated instruction. The nice thing about the small group books that are using, they're all based upon a central theme. They look almost exactly the same from the cover. So students who are in different levels of reading groups, the left styles are different. However, the topic is the same, which lends nicely for a whole group conversation. So students are all able to read the same detailed text and then be able to transfer that back into the theme for the week. Okay, during the small group time is an independent practice as well. And we're finding there's some interactive online, quick but beneficial activities depending on the vocabulary or spelling or phonics instruction. There are different types of activity cards that we can place in folders and meet kids where they are, their levels, during the independent practice. Independent reading, independent writing, lots of different options for us that we're still sifting through but find beneficial for all the varied learners in our classroom.
Teachers have resources available to them that automatically synchronize with the digital planner that the teacher can then manipulate. This includes a daily presentation and makes it quickly and easily displayed on a whiteboard. In daily presentations, there's printable resources for the week and multimedia resources like opening videos, music, movement videos. Each week, there's activities and games that can be assigned to students for differentiated support, and teachers get the materials that they need every day quickly, easily. Teachers can access the lessons and activities for small group and for individual support, and this includes digital versions of the printed level readers, which also has more titles available online. And in grades 2 through 5, there's a writer's notebook, and the students are able to submit their work online and print or copy it, and to have the teacher comment back.
And I'd like to thank Marnie because she kindly stepped in for someone who had to be out for children illness tonight.
It's going around.
All right, a little bit about the Wonders connection at home. There's a very friendly, user-friendly website that students and parents can both their vocabulary for that week, their spelling list for the week. It has a whole bunch of ideas of things you can be doing at home with your student to back up those skills that we're teaching in the classroom. So it's a really nice option for parents to take a look at and pick and choose what works best for their student for that additional support.
And then just a kind of a spattering here of the fact that it meets the needs of EL learners. I was told by Doug Fisher, who is well known, so that every student is a success story, and Wonders bases itself on that it is written and put together to help professionals, teachers who are on my pilot team and working hard so that we can plan training to be able to train all the other teachers to be ready for a school year. Nothing is worse than opening boxes and boxes of materials and thinking you're supposed to figure out how to do it. And that is what our goal is, this slow scaffold, making sure we learn to keep people informed. And Allison's going to kind of wrap us up with some final thoughts.
Yeah, so just as I think about the process and the Wonders program in general, the word that comes to mind is thorough. The curriculum is thorough. Wonders has components that support all of our students at TK. Offers a core pathway of instruction for teachers, kind of as a must-do that blends all the way from kindergarten through 5th grade. It also provides many choices for teachers for practice and apply pieces in the classroom based on their student needs and what they see in their classroom. And the process has also been thorough, as Kim mentioned. The training also has been informative. The questions teachers are asking and the discussions they're having based on the training really shows their commitment to the process, their depth of knowledge already of the program, and just the things that they're continuing to learn to really make this program successful for all of our students at TK.
So looking back at that initial list, the people that are going through the pilots and really digging in and learning, those are the takeaways. Make it a little funny, Megan Wonders' name is on there. She was our reading specialist at Lee, an integral part of looking, actually bringing Reading Street in and helping support teachers with that, and part of the process looking at Wonders. And now we get ourselves confused sometimes. Megan Wonders is the principal. But if there was anything any of the principals just wanted to add based on the process, I put you on your spot. I appreciate you being here to support our endeavor and all the work that you've done already with the pilot and making that a possibility.
I think we're all grateful for the scaffolded approach to implementation. The fact that we have multiple implementers in each grade, K-5, is extraordinarily helpful to kind of work some of this out and pick up some of the best practices before we bring it home. And I'm grateful for Dr. Page that's done a stellar job with it.
We've appreciated the extra training already too. We've had a day and a half at least, and over the summer and the beginning of the school year for trainers to come and help us so that we feel confident enough to keep going. So we appreciate that too.
I think just to add on, like you mentioned, I was part of Reading Street in that endeavor, and so in looking forward when we needed to move to something different, I was very excited when we were exploring it that it took a lot of the foundations and things we appreciate about that, but I would like to say it amped it up a level and it gave us the pieces that we were looking to better. So very excited about what it has to offer.
Well, yeah, I'm glad to hear that because it seems like, I mean, time does fly. It seems like, yeah, you were just here, like, what happened to Reading Street? Initially, I was like, what happened? Yeah, so I'm really, I guess I feel much better hearing that, that this takes what we currently have, builds on the best of it, and makes it better. So based on what's all has been learned through, research. So good. Kim, I do have a question. Did Reading Street, what does this do with middle school? Because isn't the 6th grade curriculum, right?
Middle school uses the My Perspective.
Okay.
Housed and hosted through Savas.
Okay.
Reading Street was like a different entity, different
Okay.
companies merged. I can't explain.
Okay.
I don't understand it all. So My Perspective is being continued.
Okay.
But our license is 2 years out, so
Okay.
we will be doing a secondary eval review process, just like we're doing now 6-12, to make certain
Okay.
that we have continuity, that we have the tools we need to
Sure.
look at, and that is working, and that will be starting this spring, and then go through all next year for sure. So just like everything, we're back into it. Craig, you helped that come to life
If I can just interject really, really quickly, I'm not part of this, but, Jeff threw out some very large numbers. Thank you, it's very kind. Threw out some very large numbers there, and we talked about that a little bit during the budget presentation back in June, that a lot of this is timing, right? And we do have some big revenues coming in from COVID that we needed to capture, and these are the things that we're able to do with that money to support our teachers, to support our students. So it's very cool to see this kind of take flight.
Yeah. In addition to that, the concern that I heard in your question, Ann, was curricular alignment.
Yeah.
And Wonders does align with my perspectives. So that was one of the big things that they, looked at when they were looking at a new system.
Knowing that things are improving as we move forward, is my perspective the best? Is there something that we will need to look at and determine as we move forward? There are some incredible resources out there, that weren't there 6 years ago. And those will be things that we'll continue to look at. But I don't do these things alone or take it lightly. I rely on the professionals that are doing this every day to support that thinking, and I'm so grateful for them.
I will say I stand here in awe because this is after hours for you, right? You put a full day's work in, you're here presenting, and I'm sure all this curriculum review was after hours too, right? This is all of your own love for TK schools and the kids you teach, so thank you for that. And I feel really old because Mrs. Lambert's taught my 19-year-old. And I love that you have a home perspective of spelling words because she would never bring those things home, so we could never study, right? So I think that's great that there's a home version for parents to pull. I personally love that because kids lose those things left and right. I see heads nodding, so thank you.
I would really like to thank you genuinely. I know in the elementary world, we don't like change, and this is a huge change, and I truly appreciate it that you're piloting, because it's an experiment. You may or may not, and another thing could be chosen. It looks like we're leaning towards Wonders, but I mean, you're like, I'm doing all this work, all this extra time, and I truly appreciate it. And then, a little secret, I teach Wonders also. We just started this year, so I understand. The one word I didn't hear, but a couple of you alluded to, was it's full of rigor, is a word I keep saying. My students are pushed, and they're pushed beyond their comfort zone often, all day long, with that reading program. So that's, a couple of you alluded to it, but it's there. But I also love it because they're doing things that I wish I had a couple of years ago. So again, thank you for all of your efforts, very sincerely, and just keep chugging away. We appreciate it.
Do you guys, sorry. Do you guys feel the comprehension is a little bit better in compared to Reading Street with the resources that you have?
And the pieces, I guess, and I'll let them add too, but when you look back at the reading rope, the pieces is our students are missing out on the comprehension because they're lacking in the other skills.
Right.
You can't get through a word. If you can't get through the words and you're funky reading that text, then you can't even try to make sense of it. So it's that bringing everything together to find the unique awareness. I heard a comment from fourth, I spent Tuesday with fourth in the morning and fifth in the afternoon. You guys can share, but I mean, the work in their companion where they're tracking their thinking and they're having to write and annotate text and read it multiple times and look back and think, and then there's a writing project that spans 4 to 6 weeks. So the students are tying it back to anchor text and multiple texts so that you're going to compare and contrast. So it's built in to be rigorous to help them recognize that you have to look back and you have to think and you have to make meaning of your text.
That's going to help going from grade level to grade level.
For sure.
It's hard.
Yeah, it is hard. But pulling in multiple sources of writing, that's a new thing too for fourth grade. This is my 16th year, and I'm like, we've never looked at 3 sources and pulled information from all of them and then applied it to a writing.
Unless we created ourselves.
Right. So it's all laid out for us, and it walks them through step by step. It's baby steps, and we're getting there. But it's been really good to see the kids step up and see what they can do.
Go back to your comprehension, it's not just a skill and a strategy week and you move on.
Right.
We were used to that to a degree, so we're like, oh, I hope we're, but it's trusting the process and realizing that we're building a whole reader, not just an idea one week. And it is, it focuses on like plot this week and expository text, and the tests at the end of every 2 weeks are work in progress as well, but I'm a parent and I want that for my child, so I'm thankful that it's helping us
Thank you all very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Did you feel bad that you? Oh. So sorry. So sorry.
They're adjourning to Reds.
What's that?
They're adjourning to
All day,
Reds.
buddy, so I gotta go when I can go.
No, I'm just kidding.
When I see a break, I go. I see a break in the dialogue, I go.
All right, that takes us down to public comment discussion. So I pulled some things together. We have a board policy 0166. Each agenda shall contain the following statement. This meeting is a meeting of the Board of Education in public for the purpose of conducting the school district's business and is not to be considered a public community meeting. There is a time for public participation during the meeting at the option of the presiding officer of the board. So that's our board policy about this, situation. Keeping in mind that our board has in place and it follows best practice of having a decision, voting, and then moving forward with support of that action. A public comment after that vote would be heard and appreciated, but it would not change that vote in that situation. If members of the public would like to share their thoughts with us after a vote, then the opportunity is there via email, and this method is currently used. There were concerns of a member of the public not being able to know the happenings. We do post our agenda, and our meetings are open to the public. They're currently being streamed and recorded for longevity, and they're on the school's website. Any major activity, like tonight with Wonders or previous things, they're presented with information at one board meeting, and then we vote or take action next meeting. And finally, I recognize that COVID was a generational pandemic concern. We all agree we don't need to go through that again. Managing one public comment was difficult during that time. But last year, we had a board meeting around this time with a concern. Members of the public were interrupting each other and commenting off of each other's comments. And this is not supposed to happen. The comments are supposed to be directed specifically to the board. So I read this before almost every public comment. In the second paragraph, members of the public may address the Board of Education during public comment. In the third paragraph, as a reminder, all comments shall be directed to the board and not to staff or other participants. So I just want to review that with the board. So just to wrap up, the original comments at that particular board meeting were heartfelt and sincere. That's why people came to the meeting. They were genuine. But things turned contentious really quickly. And our community is passionate, and that's what happens with passionate, about education and the growth and development of our students. Again, I fully appreciate and take to heart the comments of the public. And quite often they affirm my thought process, or simply put, better yet, they challenge me to rethink my decision. And I do that, and I think and contemplate, and that's what my job is. And it is important to hear all sides of situations. We are all representatives of the Thornapple Kellogg School District. However, I do not see a distinct advantage of adding a second opportunity for public comment. So those are my thoughts. Thank you for listening, and open to any thoughts of the board.
I think it was well stated, Matt. You summarized the key points and, yeah, brought it back to, that first question we should always ask is, what's our policy? And this affirms, what I knew to be true, that this is the time to conduct the business of the district, and people do have opportunities, ample opportunities before, during, after, and we listen. We hear, we do, but but the bottom line, the purpose of this meeting is for us as board members to deliberate, to listen to one another, to learn together and collaborate and build consensus. So thank you, Matt. That was a great summary.
Thank you.
Well, I wasn't here for the conversation at the last meeting, but so I didn't hear the reasons people were giving for why not to have a second public comment, but you all know I've been on the board a long time, and most of that time, we did have 2 public comments. And the only reason that I know of that we eliminated the second one was there was very little public attendance at our board meetings, and it was just redundant to have it at the end when there was nobody here to make comments. And I think personally, if people are asking for an opportunity to talk a second time or to have a second public comment, I think we should honor that. And I would encourage us to have a second public input at all of our meetings.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Dave, I was also on the board at the time that decision was made, and I was skeptical of the recommendation to remove the second public comment. But in hindsight, I am glad that we did. It was actually suggested to us by Mr. Blishock when he came here as our assistant superintendent. He currently, and through his time as the assistant superintendent, served on the Granville School Board. And when he came here, he said, this is unusual. We don't have a second one at Granville. And then he did a little research. I remember because we talked about it at length. And he looked at what other districts were doing, and none of them were. And they said, you might want to revisit that, because when controversy comes, it just makes it incredibly difficult to manage from the board president's standpoint, or if you have rules where, okay, you can only speak once, so you have to pick the first or the second, to put a board president in that position of having to navigate or gavel people down, or, it's just a really tough situation. And I guess I would not want to put any future board, both this current board or any future board, in the position of having to manage that, because there will be controversies. There are local controversies. There are widespread controversy, but it just amps up the flames. And we just saw it a little over a year ago with the books. I couldn't imagine if people had a whole meeting to sit and stew, how it could bubble out. So that's where I am.
Any other thoughts?
I thought you said it very well, Matt. I don't have anything to add from what you said.
All right, so it's not something we're voting on, but it sounds like we'll just stay where we're at then with one.
I really think we ought to add a second one. I really do. I think, there were some contentious times at some board meetings with public comments. Some of it, a lot of it was hard to sit through, but I really think that the more we listen, the better off we'll be. And I think that giving people an opportunity, if they're asking for it, is a good thing to do.
Okay.
I agree with Dave. I think the business of this entity is to serve the children and the parents in this district. The more we hear from them, the better. I mean, there's rules in place, and maybe we need to make those more public and more direct. But the more we hear from the parents who are ultimately serving their kids day in and day out, the more transparency we can have, the more trust they can build in us to lead their child in their full education, the time that we have with them. So I agree with Dave.
Okay. Thank you.
I don't see why it's I understand the thought of, hey, it could get contentious, but I don't know many places that are not contentious, including our own personal workplaces at times. It will happen, but we just have to navigate that.
Thank you.
I guess my hope would be that if we do open it up for a second, that maybe that would reduce some tensions, if there were any. So I've had some time to sleep on it and reflect, and I've had family members serve on the board, and at that time, there was 2 public comments. I've had some time to think about it, and I really think it would be a good move going forward.
Okay. Brenda, do you have any thoughts?
Well, I spoke before, and I had a little time to think about it, and after some reflection and looking at what other districts are doing, there's a big difference between a municipal comment period and a school board comment period. And when I was a mayor, it was before the pandemic, and there were people that were still riled up, but it was really hard to keep people on track, keep track of who said what, and if you have 2 comment periods and you're only allowed to speak 1 time, you know, that makes it really rough on the person running the meeting, and that's not really a fair position to put them in. I understand that people want to be involved, but there's lots of ways to be involved. We're very approachable. We hang around after meetings, most of us. We have email. You have our phone numbers. There's no reason why you can't reach out later and talk to us about anything, whether it's on the agenda or not. So I feel like at this time it's not really necessary, and we do have a policy that I was not aware of, and I just want to make that clear. So I was not aware of that policy, so.
Okay, thank you.
Well, the policy doesn't say we can't have a second one. It just, and the law requires us to have one.
Right.
I think that
Right.
being generous and offering a second opportunity is a good thing to do.
Okay, so it sounds like we're kind of at a 4-3. All right, well, what about moving it to the back half of the agenda as opposed to the front half?
Was that the public comment?
Yeah.
I would be opposed to that, because I like to hear the public and what they have to say with the agenda. Helps me think through some things. Sometimes it changes my mind, honestly, and where we're going to vote. I'd much rather have it ahead of time,
Yes.
before we vote on things than after.
I agree. And it gives us an opportunity too, or it gives like Mr. McCarthy an opportunity to answer questions as he hears questions or concerns, or to clear up any, anything that may be unclear. So it's an opportunity as we get to that item on the agenda that I think serves the public. Absolutely. Yeah.
I do agree with Chrissy on that comment. When, we've thought about it before about moving it to just one. That does make sense that it is retroactive to what's been instated, so.
Okay. Dave or Derek, any thoughts?
I mean, I think if we just keep it at 1, then maybe we can open it up to give some people some more information on the agenda. I think I said that last time. I'm not talking about like, just put it out on a website and let them go find it, but have people have the ability to request additional information. And maybe it's not everything that we give, that we as board members get to see, but maybe a little bit more information. So, I know I said that last
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it's something that's palatable. Yeah. So we'll leave it as it is at 1 public comment. And we can try to get more in-depth on the agenda. Good gravy, I think it's like usually averages over 100 pages, so.
Yeah, there's a lot there, so.
Okay.
Yep.
We can work on that a little bit. Okay. All right, thank you, Board. Okay, so board items for action is not happening. So superintendent's report?
Yeah, just a couple of things real quick. Last week, Wednesday, I had the opportunity to meet with students, staff, and parents. Parents' comments were very positive. They were very appreciative of what we're doing and the positive learning experiences and atmospheres that we create for students, which I thought was fantastic. The students, as you can imagine, when I sat down with them, they wanted more time between classes, they wanted longer lunch periods, but overall, they had a very good positive comments about how the school year was going, so that was great. Thursday and Friday this week, I'm going to be at a Kent County Superintendent's retreat up near Big Rapids. I'll be accessible by phone or email if you need me. And then the last week in October, I'm going to be going to a family wedding down in Virginia, so I'm going to be gone for that week. I'll use a little bit of vacation time to do that. And then the last thing, we talked last time about dates for my evaluation in December. The dates we looked at were December 12th, 13th, and 14th. And I was going to bring back to you any conflicts that may be out there. We have a middle school beginning band concert on the 12th. I don't know if anybody has a middle school band student. And then on the 14th, the Thursday, we have a 7th and 8th grade band concert. So those would be the two conflicts that are out there if you have a band member that you'd want to go to that, or if you want to go to it anyhow. But those are the only two conflicts that we have. The 13th is totally clear.
I'm just waiting for my basketball schedule to come out, so.
Yeah.
I'll let you know.
Yours
as
are
soon
not in middle school, are they? Are they in middle school, right? Okay.
No.
I think that old yet.
Ty, our oldest is in the
I
same
usually
grade.
know.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
I usually know it right now.
Do you have a grandkid that's in middle school?
So, okay.
They're in high school now.
I'm asking my AD.
Okay, got it, okay.
Erica, could you send out maybe a doodle to find out what would be the best date for all of them? And then,
Okay.
yeah, we can just use that.
Yep. Okay.
And that's it.
I was wondering, conferences, or I think one of the buildings had them. I'm not sure. Do you know where conferences are at?
On that date?
No,
I mean,
no,
that-
fall
I'm sorry.
conferences.
Oh,
Parent-teacher conferences.
You know, I don't have that in front of me. What did you say?
School was last week.
Yeah.
Elementary's the week of the 23rd.
Okay.
Okay, so we're just
school's
kind of
18th.
hitting them, yep.
High school's the 18th?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Yep, okay, good. Hopefully those are all going well. My daughter's excited because she's not taking it.
Right, yeah.
So she gets time off, yep.
Yeah.
It's exciting. Okay, well, thank you, Ms. McCarthy. Does
Thank
anybody
you.
have any questions or comments for Ms. McCarthy?
I do actually have a quick question. I know I'm stepdad, I came home with my kids this last week. Is that something that we look at as a board together about how the school district did and stuff like that at some point? Sorry, it's first year on.
No.
Yeah,
I
good
will
question.
That will be part of my presentation to you in my evaluation. I'll be bringing data to that. And then also throughout, we've been trying to determine how we're going to get all of that information in a clear, concise manner to the board.
Sure.
All right, because there's a lot there when
Sure,
you think
sure
about,
there is.
yeah, so.
Okay, great.
But
Thank
that will be forthcoming.
Great,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yep.
And I just have a question. There we go. How often, like the communication days, because how often are you planning another one? Because I mean, I
Yeah.
think it's really important for you to be available to parents and the community.
I have two more scheduled.
Okay.
January 17th and April 17th.
Okay.
So I was trying to do a beginning of the school year, middle of the school year, and end of the school year dipstick, in meeting with, staff, students, parents, just to get an idea of.
Yeah. it's
And it
important.
was very helpful. I mean, it was a long day. My wife didn't believe me that I was tired of talking, but it started at 7:45 in the morning, and I don't think I finished until 7:40 at night, just meeting with people. So,
Well, thank you for doing that. I mean, that's important to be accessible and just be there to listen and to answer questions. It's incredibly important. So thank you.
you bet.
I think you could do like a New Year's Eve,
Right.
like meet with a suit until midnight.
Well, usually New Year's
Brandon.
Eve, it's a progressive euchre party.
All right.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. McCarthy. Is there anything from the board to the board? I know we got MASB coming up, but I don't plan on attending. I think that's about it. And I'll be helping the senior class again with 50/50 if you're interested.
Only if you sell winners.
I have sold 2 winners in the last 2 years, so yes,
Alright,
come by for the
alright,
powers.
you're lucky guy.
All right, well, with all that, thank you very much, board, and thank you to the
you.
community for coming out. Meeting adjourned, 8:26.